Friends, here's a unique wedding tradition that will give you chills. A Christian couple who ran away to marry against their family's wishes experienced something so unsettling in a church that it will send shivers down your spine. The couple, both young and deeply in love, decided to marry despite their family's strong objections. Their families were against their union because their religious beliefs were different. The families made it clear that if the girl converted to their religion and accepted their pastor, they would welcome her as their daughter-in-law. The girl's family had a similar stance. This led to family feuds. But despite the pressure, Joseph and Mina remained committed to each other. As tensions escalated and both families tried to arrange their marriage elsewhere, Joseph and Mina made a life-changing decision. They decided to leave their families behind and create a world of their own, far from the divisive influences of religion and sects. They planned to run away and marry in another city, escaping their family's interference. The day they decided to leave their families behind, they headed for a different city, leaving all the emotional baggage and the familial discord behind. Joseph, while driving, held Mina's hand in his and joyfully kissed it, saying, "I want to spend these beautiful moments with you, and I can't believe the time has come. We'll marry at a church on the way, and tonight will be unforgettable for us." Unaware of what fate had in store for them, they were blissfully ignorant of the events that were about to unfold, and their wedding night would take a terrifying turn they never could have imagined. Joseph and Mina were deeply in love, but their families were staunchly opposed to their marriage. The reason for the opposition was not just their love for each other, but the stark religious differences between their families. Joseph's family, devout in their faith, demanded that Mina convert to their religion and accept their pastor as her spiritual guide if she wanted to be accepted as part of their family. On the other hand, Mina's family had the same condition. Joseph would have to embrace their religion and beliefs if they were to bless the union. This led to heated arguments, emotional turmoil, and constant pressure on the young couple to abandon their love in favor of family traditions and expectations. The situation grew tense as the families tried to plan a marriage that would comply with their religious preferences. But Joseph and Mina could not bear the thought of abandoning each other. They knew their love transcended religious boundaries, and they did not want to live their lives under the shadow of these divisive beliefs. They wanted a life of their own, free from the societal and familial pressures that sought to control their choices. After much thought and soul-searching, Joseph and Mina decided to take the bold step of running away. They couldn't bear the thought of giving up their love, and they knew that they had to leave behind the constraints of their families and religious divisions. They made a pact to create their own future, one where love would be their guiding light, and they decided to flee to another city to marry, far away from the judgment of their families and the expectations of their communities. With a shared sense of hope and excitement, they set out, leaving everything behind. As they traveled, Joseph's heart was filled with joy as he held Mina's hand, promising her that they would create their own destiny. "Tonight will be unforgettable," he whispered to her, knowing that their wedding night would mark the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. Unbeknownst to them, however, this night would unfold in ways they could never have predicted. The journey that began with love and hope would soon turn into a terrifying experience they could not have imagined. The following day, Joseph and Mina left their families behind, embarking on their journey to a new city where they would begin their life together. The road ahead was long, and as they drove through unfamiliar terrain, their excitement and anticipation grew. Joseph, filled with joy, held Mina's hand tightly, unable to hide his happiness. "I want to spend every moment with you," he said, planting a kiss on her hand. "I can't believe this is really happening. We're about to start our life together." As they drove through the quiet roads, they discussed the future they dreamed of, one where they could live in peace, away from the constraints of their families and religious divisions. They had envisioned a simple life in a small apartment in the city, a life filled with love, happiness, and mutual respect. But little did they know that the night they had so carefully dreamed of would soon be overshadowed by an unimaginable horror. Driving through a desolate stretch of land surrounded by dense bushes and trees, they came upon a small village. Their eyes caught sight of a church in the distance, an old, seemingly abandoned structure. It was the perfect place for a wedding, a place where they could quietly marry without attracting attention. The church appeared small from the outside, but there was something oddly inviting about it. Without hesitation, they decided to stop. The church seemed like a sign, a place where they could fulfill their dream of becoming husband and wife. They parked their car and walked inside, unaware of the dark secrets hidden within those walls. As they entered, the church appeared much larger and older than they had imagined, and the silence inside was almost eerie. Little did they know that this seemingly peaceful place would soon become the setting for a nightmare they would never escape from. The town they had arrived in was unfamiliar to both Joseph and Mina. They had never been here before, and everything, from the houses to the people, seemed strange. It was a remote area, and the only sounds they heard were the rustling of leaves and the occasional chirping of birds. As they continued driving, the scenery became more desolate, with fewer signs of human habitation. Eventually, they came upon a small clearing, where a few houses were scattered along the roadside. Further down, they saw a church, nestled at the edge of the area, looking old and weathered. It wasn't what they had imagined, but the church appeared to be their only option. They had no time to waste, and their excitement about their impending wedding made them eager to move forward. The church, although small and somewhat worn on the outside, felt like the right place for them. After all, they had no other plan and no more time to spare. Mina, holding Joseph's hand, smiled at the thought of finally marrying him, her heart filled with joy. They drove up to the church and parked the car. As they stepped out, a feeling of unease settled in, but they brushed it off. They were about to start their new life together, and nothing could dampen their spirits. Entering the church, they were surprised to find that it was much larger and older than it appeared from the outside. It had a historic charm, with tall, narrow windows and wooden pews that creaked under the weight of time. The smell of incense lingered in the air, adding to the eerie ambiance. The church was eerily quiet, with no one else in sight. The only person present was a priest, standing at the altar, waiting for them. He greeted them with a warm smile, his presence somehow reassuring in the stillness of the church. As they walked down the aisle, their footsteps echoed, breaking the silence. The priest welcomed them, seemingly expecting their arrival. Joseph and Mina didn't find it strange that the church was empty. After all, they were here for a private ceremony. They felt a sense of calm, unaware of the danger that awaited them as they approached the altar. They were about to begin a new chapter, but fate had a different story in mind. Joseph and Mina approached the priest, who stood patiently at the altar. The moment felt surreal. They had finally escaped their family's expectations and were about to marry in a peaceful, secluded church. As they explained their situation to the priest, he nodded with understanding and smiled warmly. "I will marry you both," he said. His voice was calm and reassuring, putting them at ease. The ceremony began with the priest guiding them through the traditional wedding rites, which Joseph and Mina followed eagerly, their hearts full of joy. As the priest spoke, the couple exchanged their vows, pledging their lives to each other, despite the difficulties they had faced to reach this point. It was a moment of pure bliss for both of them, a long-awaited dream finally coming true. While they were caught up in the emotions of the ceremony, the few locals who had gathered in the church to witness the wedding stood quietly, observing from the back. The atmosphere was strange, but Neither Joseph nor Mina paid much attention to it. They were so focused on each other that everything else faded into the background. The ceremony continued with the priest performing the final blessings before declaring them husband and wife. As they exchanged rings and sealed their vows with a kiss, the church seemed to come alive with an energy that was almost palpable. When the ceremony concluded, the couple embraced, overwhelmed with happiness. They had done it. They were finally married. As they pulled away from the embrace, Joseph's face lit up with a broad smile. He turned to the priest and said, "Thank you so much. You've made this day unforgettable for us." The priest nodded, his smile still present, and then, in a gentle voice, he said, "Now, according to the church's tradition, you must stay here for the night. It's part of the ritual. It is said to bring immense good fortune and protect your union for life." At first, Joseph and Mina hesitated. They had planned to spend their first night together in a quiet apartment, far from anyone's gaze. But something about the priest's words made them pause. It wasn't just the tradition that intrigued them. There was an unspoken urgency in his tone. They reluctantly agreed to stay, unaware that this decision would lead them down a terrifying path they never could have imagined. After the ceremony, Joseph and Mina walked to the back of the church, where the priest directed them. He led them down a narrow, dimly lit hallway that seemed to stretch far beyond what they had expected. The eerie silence in the church now felt unsettling, and their excitement began to shift into an uneasy tension. At the end of the corridor, the priest opened the door to a small room, which he described as where the married couples traditionally spent their first night. The room was filled with strange, old-fashioned furniture, and the atmosphere was heavy with the smell of incense and something else. Something musty, as if the room hadn't been used in years. Despite the discomfort, Joseph and Mina tried to shake off their unease. They had just married the love of their life, and they were determined to enjoy this moment, regardless of the unusual surroundings. The priest gave them a warm smile, almost too warm, before he left them alone. "Rest well, and the night will bring you everything you've dreamed of," he said, his voice carrying an odd emphasis on the word everything. Once alone, Mina looked around the room, unsure of how to feel. The furniture, with its faded upholstery and the dim glow of the candles around the room, gave it a peculiar atmosphere. "I've never seen anything like this," Mina whispered to Joseph. He tried to reassure her with a smile. "We'll make the best of it, and tomorrow we'll be free to live our lives the way we want." The night, however, was far from what they had expected. As they sat in the room, talking softly and trying to relax, an unsettling noise interrupted their conversation, a sound that seemed like a distant scream. It was faint at first, but as they listened, it grew louder, more desperate. Mina's eyes widened in fear. She gripped Joseph's arm, her voice trembling as she asked, "Did you hear that?" Before Joseph could respond, the floor beneath them seemed to tremble, and another scream pierced the silence. This time it was closer, and it sent chills down their spines. The room seemed to close in on them as the sounds of panic grew louder. Fear began to take over, and Joseph's protective instincts kicked in. "Stay close to me," he whispered, his voice full of urgency. They were both terrified, but neither knew what was happening or why. The terror of the unknown had begun to seep into the very air around them. As the terrifying screams echoed through the church, Joseph and Mina's hearts raced with fear. The strange, eerie sounds seemed to come from nowhere, but they grew louder with each passing second. Mina clung to Joseph, her grip tight with anxiety. "What is happening?" she whispered, her voice shaking. Joseph, trying to calm her, glanced around the dimly lit room, but there was no sign of what could be causing the noise. Suddenly, another scream rang out, this one louder and more frantic. It was as if someone was calling for help, their voice filled with pure terror. The sound was so chilling that it sent a wave of cold dread through Joseph and Mina. Without thinking, they rushed toward the door, their instincts screaming at them to leave the room. But as they reached the door, the floor beneath them seemed to tremble, and the walls seemed to close in. It was as if something or someone was watching them from the shadows. Joseph turned to Mina, his face pale with fear. "We need to find out what's going on," he said, his voice tense with urgency. Together, they carefully stepped back into the hallway, their footsteps soft against the old wooden floor. The house of worship that had seemed so calm and inviting only hours earlier now felt like a prison, its dark corners hiding secrets they couldn't even begin to comprehend. As they moved cautiously through the church, they came to the back of the room where a large rug lay. Something about it caught Joseph's attention, and he crouched down to lift it. Beneath the rug, he noticed something unusual, a small concealed door that seemed out of place. His heart raced as he pulled at the handle, revealing a dark, narrow staircase leading down into an unknown, ominous space below. With no other choice, they both descended the stairs, the air growing colder with every step. The sound of their footsteps echoed, amplifying the silence that enveloped them. As they reached the bottom, a dim light revealed a horrifying sight. There, in the center of a large hidden chamber, were piles of bones, human remains scattered across the floor, their whitened skeletons a gruesome reminder of what had happened to those who came before them. Joseph and Mina were frozen in shock, their eyes wide with disbelief as they took in the sight. The screams they had heard now made sense. This church, this place they thought was a sanctuary, was a trap, one designed to lure them into a nightmare they could never escape. The hidden chamber they had stumbled upon was like something out of a nightmare, a place so dark and sinister that it seemed to pulse with an eerie energy. Joseph and Mina stood at the threshold, unable to move, as they took in the grotesque scene before them. The chamber was vast, its stone walls covered in grime and cobwebs, and the floor was littered with human bones. But it wasn't just the bones that terrified them, it was the fact that many of them still wore wedding clothes. The bones of young couples, dressed in their wedding gowns and tuxedos, lay scattered in macabre pose, their bodies long since decayed. Joseph's heart raced, and Mina, unable to control her fear, took a step back. This can't be real," she whispered, her voice trembling. "What is this place? What happened here?" The air was thick with the smell of decay, and the silence was deafening, broken only by their shallow breaths and the occasional creak of the old church's timbers. They could barely process what they were seeing. Couples who had come to this church, just like them, had met a horrifying fate. It seemed that the church was not a place of love, but of death, a trap set for unsuspecting newlyweds. As they stood in stunned silence trying to make sense of the horrific scene, Joseph noticed something else. Several doors along the walls of the chamber, all of them sealed shut with heavy locks. It was as if the church had been hiding something even darker, a deeper secret that had remained hidden for years. Mina's eyes scanned the room, her fear intensifying with every passing second. "We need to leave, Joseph, now," she urged, her voice sharp with panic. But Joseph, driven by a desperate need to understand what had happened, moved closer to the pile of bones. He cautiously stepped forward, pushing aside some of the remains to uncover what lay beneath. What he found was a horrifying discovery. A hidden chest, its surface covered in dust and cobwebs. He opened it with shaking hands, revealing a collection of old photographs and papers. The pictures showed couples, similar to Joseph and Mina, smiling and posing in their wedding clothes. But in the background, the same priest from earlier was present, smiling eerily as he watched the couples. The realization hit them like a bolt of lightning. This was no ordinary church. It was a death trap, a place where newlywed couples were lured and sacrificed, and their bodies were left to rot. Before they could process any further, a voice interrupted their thoughts, a voice they knew all too well. The priest. His sinister laugh echoed through the chamber, and they knew without a doubt that they were in grave danger. As Joseph and Mina stood frozen in the dreadful chamber, the unsettling silence was broken by a chilling laugh that seemed to echo from the shadows. The sound was unmistakable. It was the priest, the very man who had welcomed them into this church, who had promised them a happy future. But now his voice carried a dark, sinister edge, and it sent a wave of terror through their veins. "Very clever, aren't you two?" The priest's voice echoed, as if he were watching them from every corner of the room. "I've been doing this for over 10 years, and not a single couple has ever had the courage to uncover the truth. But here you are, curious, brave, or foolish enough to discover what lies beneath." Joseph and Mina's hearts raced, their bodies tense with fear. They spun around, trying to locate the source of the voice, but the priest was nowhere to be seen. His laugh filled the air surrounding them like a thick fog. "You should have left when you had the chance," he continued, his voice now dripping with malice. "But now it's too late." Joseph's breath quickened, his fists clenching in a mix of anger and fear. "What is all this?" he demanded, his voice trembling with a blend of confusion and fury. "What kind of sick game is this? Why are you doing this?" The priest's voice chuckled darkly. "This is no game, Joseph. This is the way it has always been. You see, my dear, I've been luring unsuspecting couples here for years. I offer them a wedding, a ceremony, the illusion of love and happiness. And when they fall for it, I bring them into this chamber where they meet their tragic end. Their wedding night, meant to be a moment of joy, becomes their final, fatal one." Mina gasped, her hands shaking as she clung to Joseph for support. You're a monster!" she cried, tears welling up in her eyes. The realization of the truth hit her like a hammer. The priest wasn't just performing marriages. He was trapping them, slaughtering them, and profiting from their deaths. The priest's laugh grew louder, more menacing. "And now you two will join them. Your fate was sealed the moment you stepped into this church. But don't worry," he said with a twisted smile in his voice. "You'll be part of something much bigger now. Your bodies, your lives, they'll be sold. And I'll continue, as I always have." The horrifying truth sank in. Joseph and Mina had walked straight into a death trap, and the priest's sinister plan was now unraveling before their eyes. The terror of their impending doom was imminent, and they were running out of time. The horrifying truth had fully set in for Joseph and Mina. The priest, a monster disguised as a man of God, had laid out his sinister plan in front of them. Their wedding night, which should have been a joyous beginning to their life together, had turned into a nightmare from which there seemed to be no escape. The chilling realization that they were the latest victims of a gruesome scheme to trap newlyweds for profit and death made their blood run cold. Joseph's protective instincts kicked in. His mind raced as he desperately searched for a way to fight back. He wasn't about to let this twisted man take everything from them, especially not after everything they had been through to be together. With one swift movement, he pulled Mina behind him, stepping forward with determination. "You won't get away with this," he said through gritted teeth. The priest's mocking laugh echoed through the chamber, but Joseph was undeterred. The priest, standing in the shadows, was now taunting them. "You're too late, my dear. You're already a part of this, and there's no going back." He moved closer, his voice dripping with malice. But Joseph, despite his fear, was resolute. He knew he couldn't let the priest continue his twisted operations. With a burst of adrenaline, Joseph lunged forward, using his strength to strike the priest. His punch connected with the priest's face, sending him staggering backward. Mina, terrified but determined, grabbed a broken piece of bone from the floor and threw it at the priest, hitting him squarely on the head. The priest fell to the ground, dazed and furious. Joseph moved quickly, pinning him down and restraining him with all his might. Mina, her fear giving way to anger, grabbed the priest's wrist, preventing him from reaching for a weapon. They weren't going to let him harm anyone else. As the priest struggled beneath Joseph's grip, Mina reached for the phone in her pocket and quickly dialed the emergency number. "Help! We need help! We're in a church and there's a man trying to kill us!" she shouted into the phone, her voice trembling but urgent. The police arrived within minutes, but the nightmare was far from over. The priest was arrested, but as they took him away, the truth about his involvement in a larger gang came to light. It was revealed that he had been part of a network that lured innocent couples to their doom. However, as the police car left the church, tragedy struck. A mysterious vehicle rammed into the police car, causing a deadly crash. The priest and several officers died on the spot, and the true extent of the priest's criminal activities would never be fully known. Joseph and Mina, shaken but alive, were left with a chilling sense of closure, knowing that the horror they had escaped from would remain a dark secret, one that may never be fully unraveled.